Do you remember courting at school? Well, it probably consisted of a handwritten note saying, I like you. But today, everything's changed. Children have become highly sexualized. Courting is done with sexting, with nude photos, explicit and aggressive sexual messages and images. And believe it or not, your children are watching porn and they're learning about their roles from porn. Even their pranks are now becoming sexual. Of course, if we talk about this, we instantly say, well, this is really bad for girls. And most women think that it harms boys. Experts disagree on this, but ultimately, boys are hardwired differently.
What are the experts saying?
Well, the real experts, I mean the ones that have studied this for many years, say boys are hardwired differently. Casual sex doesn't affect boys emotionally and psychologically the way it does girls. However, there are some really negative aspects to sexting and sending these sort of messages to each other at a very young age, and ultimately it's creating a warped image of girls.
Oh, yeah.
I agree. I
But for the
completely agree with
boys
that.
as well, I'm talking about for the boys, because it confuses boys about what girls are and what their expectations are, even if the way they talk to each other.
Yeah.
We just mentioned a moment ago the story of a 6-year-old girl saying, this boy asked me if I wanted to do sex. This is where it's coming from.
Right.
Probably the greatest damage it does for both boys and girls, it undermines the development of mature relationships. If your boy thinks that the only way to connect with a girl is through sex, he's going to grow up thinking that. So
and I'm so glad you're highlighting this, because every time we do stories like these, it's about the girls and the teenage girls and the women.
Right.
And it is, if you're a parent of a boy, don't just assume because he's a boy, he can handle it and understand.
And what do you say to the boys?
Well, these are
how
the
do
tips. Number one, you've got to sit down and be willing to talk to your kids. Just do it. Don't wait for it. Just sit down as soon as they walk into school, from school, how was school, etc. Sit down and say, hey, I want to chat with you, and start talking about what is going on at school. How do you connect with girls? Number two, or how do you connect with the opposite sex? Talk about Facebook. Talk about sexting.
Yeah.
Use their language, because they won't understand you unless you use their language. Number two, start talking about roles and expectations of each other, of the opposite sex, which leads to number three, reveal to them the ways that you should be treating the opposite sex.
Yeah.
Talk about respect, talk about boundaries. Look, if you don't have to be an expert, you don't need to have a PhD, just sit down with your children and start, sit on the same eye level with them and start talking.
But what you're saying is that being a healthy role model in their lives.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a great point. Be a healthy role model, but be willing to have the tough conversation. Don't think about yourself, think about your children.